My good friends, it is that time again. We're getting ready to get into the Logic User Guide. Now look, there's two ways to look at this. My good friends, you can look at it as an opportunity, as a way for you to get better, increase your value, gain more knowledge, be more proactive in your life. Or you can look at this like just another moment, just another video, just another guy just talking on YouTube. Now it's up to you. Now I suggest to you before we undergo this journey that this is your choice. Regardless of what you do and what you think, I'm going to bring it. Every single time we do this, we give it our all. We make sure that we apply ourselves, that we do our best, because today is the day. Remember, it only takes one moment to completely change the course of your life, of your destiny. And if you want to change the trajectory of your career and your music productions, then stay tuned. Here we go. Okay, how's it going, YouTube? It is Thursday. Not sure what the date is, but I know it's Thursday. And we're going to get into the Logic User Guide. The following is growing. People are getting it, getting everything that we need with this video series brought to you by hfmusicacademy.com. Before we get started, we encourage you to sub just to increase the awareness, right? Get the YouTube algorithm going so that we can get more people on board so that everyone learns this program to the best of their ability. And it's not learning for the sake of learning. It's learning so that you can get what it is that you are seeking to get from your music. Remember, it's your music and nobody else's. And just a quick side note, I just released a new single. You want to check it out under Eddie Gray, Grey, and it's called I Fade. All right, cool. So let's get into it. Last we left off, we were talking about the Logic Pro audio region parameters. Today, we're going to go over that again. This time, it's not just going to be words. We're going to work on some examples. And then from there, we're going to go into the Midi region parameters, and we're going to see how this can actually benefit you as a Logic Pro user. We're going to wrap up by covering quantization values. If you've never heard of it, seen it, then this is the time to understand what it is, simply because it can be the difference between a tight performance and something that just sounds loose and like it's wafting around, meandering with no particular cause. Let's be intentional, let's get focused, and let's get it. Here we go. So we're looking at the audio region parameters. I covered these yesterday. We just kind of, went through the list just to kind of plant the seeds in our minds. Today, we actually go over these parameters. So I'm going to go ahead and share with you. Going into Logic itself, I'll be going back and forth between both programs. Now, the best way to learn this curriculum, I'm telling you right now, is to do it side by side. You're listening to something I'm saying, and then you immediately just press pause if possible, and then just get into whatever the lesson plan is. So right now we're covering audio region parameters. I want you to cleanse your ears for a minute and just listen to this track just to give you a little bit of context of what we're actually going to be working on. Here we go. Okay, now quick disclaimer. I would never actually touch the master channel. I just, I don't want to look back and somebody's like, oh, he's touching the master channel. So just be clear. And if anybody does start saying something on the comments, have my back. Make sure you cover my 6. All right, so here we go. We're looking at the audio region parameters. Now, it's best to learn this information when you have a solid example in mind. If you just start doing the work and you're not clear on how to use these parameters, there could be a missing. And so I'm trying to go directly to the source so you're not missing anything, right? You're just right there. You're in it. And so we're going to listen to this lounge vibe, track 13. Now, I could just show you the typical workflow, what everybody on YouTube is going to do, but I need to make sure that I equip you with the right tools so that when you're working, when you're collaborating, when you're in a session, when you're tracking, you know what it is you got to do. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit T like Tom. That is summoning the tool menu. I'm going to use the solo tool. I can click or I can use the key command Shift S. Now these are key commands that I myself have burned in the key command window. So if you want to go ahead and change those, you can. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and select these two here. So let's go ahead and play them by click and holding. Okay. So let's try that again. Okay. So a little bit easier than that, to be honest, is going into the solo mode up here. So I have a great curriculum about this, which we'll be covering at hfmusicacademy.com very soon. It's called the 8 solo functions. Now within the Logic Pro program, there's actually 8 ways and 8 different ways to solo. And it's really incredible when you really get to the nitty gritty. And I'm teaching these methods mostly to teach and show others how to avoid issues that are problematic. For example, let's say you didn't know what solo mode was, and maybe you hit it by mistake, and you didn't see the LCD screen actually changed colors. Did you guys notice that? This is not a magic show, but did you notice that? So as soon as I went into solo mode, you can see that the LCD screen quite literally changed colors, right? And so when I do teach this program, I'm teaching the nuts and bolts so that everybody learns their way, right? I understand there won't be one cookie cutter program, but if you teach the fundamentals, then everybody will find their own unique way of expressing themselves. So solo mode, I think, is a little bit more comprehensive, and so we'll use that. And so if I select lounge vibes, you can see that they're now in key focus. I can move the playhead. I can hit Shift spacebar, which is play from selection, so it'll start at bar 5 at the beginning of this region. And I can also just hold Shift, click in the tracks area. The playhead will follow suit, and then I can press play from here. And I believe you can also shift and just double click. There it is. Okay, so that's our working example for today. I'm going to hit I to open up the inspector. We're inside of the region inspector. We know this is a very important part of the program. We're also going to look at the track inspector right below. Okay. If you go into the region inspector, we know there is a sub menu. It's called More, right? Click on that disclosure triangle and we are good to go. So I just want to be very specific with what we're looking at here, okay? We're looking at the region inspector. I will get rid of this annotation, but I just want to be clear that we're all in this section of the screen. Now, to help you a little bit, I want you to go into your preferences, okay? I want you to go into display. You can also use the main menu bar, preferences, display. Now, when you go in this menu, do me a favor. Large inspectors give you a little bit more screen real estate, more bang for your buck. All right, cool. So then now we're ready to listen to these specific parameters. We are in solo mode. This gives us an advantage in terms of being able to solo something at will and listening to it so that we can get the most from the lesson, so we can extract as much knowledge as possible. So again, both of these are soloed, right? Everything's good. Everything's on the up and up. And so if we mute the regions, well, then obviously they're going to be muted out. And as I've spoken to you before, the difference between this region, which is muted, but it's not muted on a region basis. It's almost like the entire track is muted. Now we know these are muted because, well, we enabled them. But moreover, if you look at the region itself, there's a little dot here. And that gives us an indication that this is actually a muted region. So I'll use the key command this time, Control M, and that corresponds with that menu. We can loop as well, but what you'll find is because these regions are inhabited by other regions, right? There's no space to the left or right of them. Nothing's going to happen. So the loop feature is rendered useless. I mean, you really can't do much. Now, of course, if it is on and I delete this, for example, what happens? But it starts to loop because it's kind of a hidden built-in feature that you set up. And so let's disable that. We don't need that. We're going to hit the key command L. Again, that will correspond with the region inspector transposition. Well, we know that's going to raise that up. We've gone over this, but something that I probably didn't show you, I'm not sure, I don't remember, but if I hit Option up arrow key, that's going to change the value by semitones. If I hit, let's try Shift Option, it will go up and down by octaves. So Shift Option up arrow key, and then of course the opposite is true, Shift Option down arrow key. Okay. So if something is transposed up an octave, if it normally sounds like this, then it'll sound one octave higher. Now, in some cases that'll work. You might need some post-processing to really get it to gel, but that's an option, right? Creatively speaking, that can be an intro, a bridge, right? An outro. Check out, let's see, 1 octave below the original pitch. So that sounds really rad. I like that. Of course, sky's the limit. You can really do anything. And then so if we work with fine tuning, we're no longer talking about semitones. We're really just talking about sense. So kind of the value in between the microtone, in between the semitone. So instead of it going up, let's say from B to C or C to C sharp, there are values between B and C and also C and C sharp. So if you want to slightly create a variation, a deviation, then you're going to want to do that with fine tune. This is especially important with 808s. I find that they're often detuned, or at least when we're talking about the entire waveform, right? The A, the D, the S, and the R. The release tends to kind of pitch down, or even the attack, the initial attack has a higher pitch and it'll kind of dip down. And so anyway, for that reason, we can use fine tune. Okay. Remember that the maximum value is 50, then it becomes a semitone, and then of course the negative value of 50 would be a semitone down. So if I'm on B, then that would be B flat. Yeah. Cool. All right. So let's see here. Follow tempo. Okay. So now we get into something that has some laws, has some workarounds. And you can see that when I clicked it, it kind of messed everything up, right? So let's figure out exactly why this is happening, and also what's determining this behavior. So when we go here to flex and follow, it says here, choose whether the region follows the project tempo. Okay, so is it going to follow the project tempo? Is it going to be flexed? And also at what resolution? So there are different algorithms when you are using flex and follow. Now, you can see that when I disable the feature, which is right up here, just want to make sure, good. The regions will now begin to overlap, even though my drag mode is set to no overlap. Of course, that's not the only determinant. If I go to follow tempo, again, I disable it, boom, it just moved everything over. It's just a mess now. There are overlaps. Now this is because it's not following the project tempo anymore. At least that's what I assume. Let's go ahead and check it out. Let's corroborate that information. Key Command K. We're listening to the metronome as we're listening to Lounge Vibes. All right, so just as I stated, we turned off the follow tempo, and so there are some consequences because essentially you're changing the behavior of what these files are doing. And so if you really want Logic to operate at its maximum potential, we're going to really have to learn all the bylaws, right? What's the byproduct of me turning this on? What occurs? If I want this result, what do I have to turn on or off? Right? We have to understand our preferences. We have to understand the project settings. Very important. So what we're going to get into now is gain. And so with gain, we're talking amplitude. In other words, when all of this is played back and funneled through the channel strip, how is it going to sound? Let me give you a better example. Let me close the track inspector for a quick sec. Okay, I think this will work. So we're looking at track number 9, okay? And I know this is MIDI. We're going to go back to the audio. Just give me a second. So I'm going to create an annotation here, and I want you to just kind of work with me here. So let's pretend that this is where the sound starts, okay? And then the sound magically travels all the way back to the channel strip, and then it goes through a process depending on what is inserted. Now, there is no EQ, so it's not being EQ'd at all. There is no compressor, so it also is not being touched, at least at the very top here. Well, there actually is a compressor. I just saw that. So there's no EQ. There's no MIDI effects, so nothing is causing any changes, arpeggiation, transposition. There's a lot you can do with MIDI effects. We're just going directly into drum kits. This is how we're affecting the sound. So we can think of this as the signal chain, right? The source sound goes to the channel strip, goes through one compressor in this one here, and then a second tape emulation here. Now, from there, if you had sends, it would be also touched and affected by the sends. I don't have any right now. And then also any panning that you are working on, it will be reflected. And then lastly, the volume, which is different than gain, by the way. We need to be clear about that. The gain in an audio region is different. Now, this is a MIDI software instrument track, so we're not necessarily using gain, but I just want you to understand that gain is amplitude, whereas volume is just a level, just a readout. So then if you think about this signal chain, now when we get back into the example, if these are off, it's going to affect the overall loudness, right? It's going to change the way that this is processed. So if I go back to track number 13 then, all right, and we look at gain, this is happening before the channel strip. So in other words, that signal chain, it starts here, down into gain, and you can increase or lower it. Then we're running through all these various parameters, and then it's going through processing. So I only have a saturator or harmonic saturator called Reviver here, which just using it for just a little magic, just a little sheen. So I just wanted to be clear about how gain works and why you would want to utilize gain as opposed to volume. Volume is happening after the fact. Post-fader is what they call it. And gain is happening pre-fader, before all of this processing. And so the gain directly influences the channel strips and how the plugins behave and react to the amount of amplitude going into the channel strip. All right. So now with all that being stated, the gain is going to affect the channel strip. And so depending on how loud you want this, right, this is the kind of, not the main theme, but this is kind of like the harmonic background. And so it needs to be loud enough. And so when we listen to this, you can hear that it's certainly making its presence felt. Of course, that piano is really the one that's in charge, right? That's the main actress. All right, cool. So going back here, delay. What is this all about? Why is there a delay? It's not an effect in the traditional way of thinking about it. It has more to do with the positioning of the region. So if we look closely at track number 13, I'm going to hit Z to zoom to selection. And I really refine my zoom level by using the pinch gesture. Now, if I start to utilize tick, you guys know snap to grid is my jam. That's what I do, how I do when I do what I do. And so if I hit option and right arrow key, bear in mind my nudge value is set to tick. I have it set to a key command. So that now look at this. See how it's moving over ever so slightly? Well, that's what delay is going to do for you. Now, the only trick about it, which is really fascinating, is it's not visual. See, I just performed this visually for you so we can take note, right? Take a mental screenshot. But what's happening here is that you're delaying something, but it's not visually on the screen. Now, why would Logic do that? What would be the purpose of this kind of function? Well, if you really think about it, sometimes if something adheres to the grid, if it's visually on the grid, it's much more easier to work with as a whole. Let me be more specific. When we talk about this MIDI track, if it's not perfectly on the grid, it can be quite the challenge to really make this work. In other words, let's pretend this was my performance. Can you imagine really trying to get this to gel well if I don't understand quantization? Now, what if I wanted a push feel or a pull feel, something that sounds a bit more laid back? Then it would be really complicated to try and edit notes if everything is off the grid. You know, maybe like, okay, well, I want this one off here. It would take forever. So with this feature now, we get the unique ability to be able to, both in MIDI and audio, to move the performance forward or back. Let me perform it with MIDI simply because this is a lead and it would apply just right off the bat. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the delay function here and we're going to move the position of this in such a way where it feels like it's dragging. Because as of now, it's a bit dynamic in nature and very explosive. Take a listen, piano. So just for kicks, let's go ahead and raise this up. Let's see what we can do. We also know that we can use the up and down arrow menu, but I want to use ticks. So here's the same performance with a value of a 64th note, or how many ticks is that? 60 ticks. And let's see how that affects the performance, shall we? Well, you see, my good friends, in my estimation, I like it better. Here's before. Right there, it's 2 on the nose. Now, look, I would understand for all my bass players, drummers, yeah, you guys need to be in the pocket. I get that. And maybe even, of course, this is genre dependent, so let's just get that out of the way. But it's not a bad idea to get somebody to play a little bit differently, especially if the rhythm section is as tight can be. So then now I am purposefully, let's exaggerate a little bit. I'm purposefully getting the piano player to play behind the beat, right? Kind of makes the song a bit more chill. Check it out. So obviously when exaggerated, you can hear that basically it just sounds like he's, way too lax about it. But if we take that differential and we bring it down, you can possibly create some magic. All right, awesome. So that is invaluable. I'm telling you, especially when your ear grows accustomed and you really start to work the system, this is going to be gold. All right, track 13. We're still within the audio region parameters. And now we're talking about fade in, fade out, which we really have covered extensively. So I'm going to move on. We know we can reverse a region. We can also just hit Control-Shift-R, and that too will reverse this audio region. All right, that's a pretty cool sound. And so after that, the last thing to account for is speed. Now, I did point something out yesterday that I always find really fascinating about this program. Now, you got to remember, I've taught a lot of people. I've worked with a lot of different users, beginners, intermediate, advanced, right? Mid-level, like super high-tech ninjas, people that just bought the program yesterday. And so a lot of questions come up, a lot of scenarios come up. And so I want to point to the fact, let's see here. If we look, hold on, let me just give you, okay. If we look at track 11, which is a recorded bass, an actual recorded bass, take a listen. And a noisy one at that. So when we look at the region inspector, again, left-hand side, we see all the usual suspects: mute, loop, quantize, transpose, all of this good stuff, right? But there's something that we're missing: speed. Where did it go? Well, if we go over to track 13, what do you know? Here it is right here. So what is the deal with that? Now, what's fascinating about this is these aren't topics that a lot of people are going to talk about. And so this is why it's important that we maintain this relationship and that we take this all the way. It's not enough for you to just watch the one video. I mean, that really would be pointless because you're really missing the entire fabric of what we're creating here at hfmusicacademy.com. And if you're appreciating the content, go ahead and sub, go ahead and share, right? All the socials, guys. Just take a screenshot. Hey, guys, we love HF Music Academy. Eddie Gray's just given us the realest information that we've ever heard on Logic Pro. Thank you very much. Okay, but what's going on here is that when we utilize Apple loops, we get some more functionality out of our audio regions that we simply can't get when we actually record something. And we're going to corroborate this information as always, right? Don't believe me. Let's always kind of make sure that we take it to that next level and we see the hard facts in front of us. But from my estimations, I'm looking right at it, and I can clearly see that everything that is a Logic loop has speed associated, although not this one. So this is a case study at this point. Okay, so we're gonna go to the bottom of our tracks area so that I can just drag in a track here. Okay, and one thing I recently learned from what I remember, if I take this Cuban fun timbale right here, and I believe I have to hold, no, that's not it. Yeah, I can drag it in between here. Is that right? Oh, geez, no. Okay, I have to check on that. I don't want to do it this way because I just want to make sure I'm giving you the real stuff. So let's drag this all the way down to the bottom of the screen. Let's go bar 11. Okay, so we know that this is its own independent track, and what do you know? There's speed right there. We also have the reverse functionality as well, which I didn't think we had with the recorded API base. See how there's no reverse function? Again, this is why it's important. Right now, this is what I want you to do, especially for my beginners, okay? Just write a quick note. When recording my own track, I will not be able to reverse a function within the region inspector. But when I drag in a loop from the Apple Loop browser, we have the capability of reversing. Now, you might want to word that your own way, of course, but if I go into untagged loops, which is something we also have covered in this Logic User Guide tutorial, and let's pull up a drum loop. Now, this is third party. Let's see what the verdict is. Do we get the functionality? Yes, we do. Now, why is that? Really quick. Simply because we ingested it within the Apple ecosystem. So because it went through the untagged loops, filtering, the algorithms meta tagged it, right? They picked up on all the transients. And so now you can use this functionality. Now, the real test before we move on would be to drag in something that is third party. I hope I can find something in here. Yes, I can, because I actually recorded these guitars. They're right here. Let me just check. Loud. Okay, so we're going to drag this in. Recorded in Logic. So looks like we can reverse, but no speed. Now, let's just check one last thing before we move on. Flex time. When it's on, no reverse function, no speed function. Okay, so there it is right there. So we can reverse, but flex mode has to be off in order to access that feature. And really what I'm interested in here, guys, is that you really just run through your exercises like this. You know, like when you're doing your research, you're kind of going through this process of like, wait, is this, is this it? Should I try this? So let's try this one more time. Here's super fuzz. Again, region inspector, I can reverse, but if I turn on flex time, guess what? We cannot. Okay. So third party recorded stuff will not be able to access some of those finer features. And really, we should do this just one more time. Hang on. Let me go to my favorite samples, initial audio, the best ever. We can also let's do boots and claps by that sound. Let's just drag in this wet clap. Okay, so now this is third party. And again, oh, and you see now we get the speed. This also may be Apple compliant. So, some of these, you gotta be careful. That's kind of what I'm telling you here. Let's go back to this menu one more time. Let's go favorite samples. This time I'll choose initial audio, my favorite samples in the game. And let's do this 808 monster sub. Let's see what kind of results we get here. Reverse speed. Okay, so samples look like they're clearing. We're getting reverse and speed. And when you record yourself, let me see if I can get input. Oh, I've turned off my inputs. Just let's get that on the table, and then we will go from there. Here. Okay, this is taking a little longer than expected. You're just tuning in, Eddie Gray, going over the Logic user guide. Hope you're enjoying this content. I'd love to give, just a closer look, an inside look into how the program works, how to research, how to break problems down, how to, get your way out of certain situations. I think that would be the most valuable thing really for anybody. So let's do one last scenario here. So this is an audio track. I'm hooked up to input number 5. Okay. I've turned off input monitoring so that I'm not listening to myself. And I'll solo the track and I'll just reduce the volume. So let's go ahead and hit record really quick. All right, just a quick test. 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. All right, so no need to even listen to this. In fact, let me just mute it in case anything happens. But looks like, again, the reverse functionality is there, but not the speed. So I just want you to be clear about how to work this out. It seems like when you drag in third-party samples, it's okay. I've tried out a couple that I believe are not Apple compliant, like Initial Audio. I don't think they do all the necessary metadata for it, but I guess I could try one more. Let me try these. Yeah, let me just try these symbols really quick. Again, third party, and this will really be the determinant factor. All right, so we get reverse and not speed. So that's the only thing that you get when you're not using when you're not using Apple Loops, is the speed function. But if you record your own file, then just like we said before, you get reverse but not speed. So that is that. Okay, so let's continue on here with Q range, and then we'll go into the MIDI region parameters. So what is Q range and how do we work through and work with it? So when I go into the same part we've been talking about, which is the lounge vibes. Actually, wait a minute. There we go. So just correcting something that we talked about. I recorded the API base because I didn't notice it was in flex time, and so this is why we didn't see that reverse function right there. So again, if you record yourself, you will get reversed, but if you enable flex time, then you won't. Okay. So then now let's pretend that we quantize this. Okay, we like, I don't know, a value of 16th. Let's just choose the default stuff. We get some options. And so we should really look at what these do. Q range and Q strength. Q for quantize. All right, range. This is a very musical quantization method. It requires a certain amount of technical music prowess. Okay, how so? It's ideal for recordings that already have the right groove, so we're no longer talking groove, but they're either too rushed or too chill. So what's interesting about this is it says that it's too hurried or too laid back in places. So maybe like it's kind of on, and then maybe for certain parts, they kind of get ahead of the beat or you get behind the beat. It allows you to retain the original feel, but positions the rhythmic center precisely in the groove. Value of 0 means that every note is quantized. And then, of course, if you apply negative values, only notes that fall outside the set range are moved to the ideal quantization, while notes closer to an ideal position remain unquantized. So we want to go negative value. This moves the most poorly played notes, those outside the range, to perfect timing, or at least toward these positions, depending on the Q strength. So it looks like Q range and Q strength are going to work together, right? They're symbiotic. This percentage value determines how far a note is shifted towards the nearest grid position. So when it does shift, how much is it going to shift? Is it going to be 100% or somewhere in between? 0% leaves the note at its recorded position. Okay, cool. So now we're going into this final section. Some audio region parameters are different for standard audio regions than for Apple loops. So this is kind of what we were talking about. The fade and gain parameters are available for standard audio regions, but not for Apple loops. I want to check that out. And the transposition and follow tempo parameters are available for Apple loops and untagged loops, but not for standard audio regions. Okay, let's test these out. It says here that the fade and gain parameters are only available for regular audio regions, but not for Apple loops. Man, that's just hard to believe. I think that's old because, let's see here. If I drag in any one of these Apple loops right here, there's gain and there's fade. So that's a ding. Let's take that out, and I want to strike through that, but not for Apple loops. Okay, So yeah, let's strike through that. Let me take out this yellow stuff. Strike through. Okay, cool. So yeah, this is in an effort to, make this manual the best that it can possibly be. And so let's test this out. The transposition and follow tempo parameters are available for Apple loops, but not for standard audio regions. Oh yeah, this definitely is not right. So let's see. Do I still have my voice down here? I recorded it at some point. Hold on. There it is. Okay, so I recorded myself talking not so long ago, and there's transpose, and there's flex and follow, so that's not true also. Because that is a standard audio region, right? And also if I drag in a third-party sample or loop, it's going to work as well. So we know that this is not true. All right, cool. Ah, geez. Sorry, guys. Hold on. Beautiful. And we need to strike through. Sweet. Command S. Okay. So do your research. Stay on top of it. Don't just listen to somebody just because they say it. You have to go through the rigor, the practice, and the protocol, right? These things change. Some of the statements that I've made may have been true on 10.4, 10.5, 10. But when you do start to upgrade and evolve into new versions, you're going to have to adapt into what the reality of that program is. So let's continue on. We're going to start covering MIDI regions when we get back from a word from our sponsors. Here we go. Cool. All right, guys. So let's cover MIDI region parameters. Time to get right back into it again. I hope you're really enjoying this. I'm telling you, this is pretty awesome stuff. I really think that a lot of people are going to benefit, and from all the different emails and comments and posts, I'm already seeing it. So yeah, thank you guys very much. Let's cover Logic Pro region parameters. You ready? Here we go. So you're going to find a lot of the same options when it comes to the MIDI region parameters, but of course, it will be different in some ways as well. Also, when we get into quantization, we get more options, right? You see other opportunities to change up your performance by way of cue swing, velocity, dynamics. So we're going to cover all of this at length. Whereas previously we read the whole thing and then we did it. This time we're going to do it right on the spot. Here we go. Okay, my good friends. So let's get into the MIDI region parameters. If there's one thing that could make the biggest difference, in my opinion, for the modern creative, it's the performance and the playback of their MIDI region parameters. There's just not enough change going on. Everybody's running the MIDI workflow, hit R, record the performance, double click the MIDI region, Command A, Q for quantize, next. That isn't always going to work. There are just times where you need to work with other parameters that are going to change up the game for you. How do you distinguish yourself amongst a world of other producers, beat makers, songwriters. You do it by becoming proficient at what you do and finding your own unique sound. This is a process of experimentation. It will take some time, but you increase the likelihood of you discovering that potential and unearthing who it is you're meant to be by learning as much as you can. Now, I didn't say only learning. Of course, the application is way more important, and the true learning happens as you apply the information that we're covering, right? That's what we would consider wisdom, right? Because you start to inherit new lessons. You start to become more because you're using the information. If you're just watching this and listening to me, that's great. I thank you for the love, and I want you to stay tuned in. But really, what's going to make the biggest difference, I just want to keep it real with you. What's going to make the biggest difference is you applying everything I talk about. That's the only thing that will really last here. So please go back to the DAW when it's time and get your repetitions in. So I'm not going to cover the obvious, but we will certainly get into Q swing. So there are two types of region quantizations as mentioned in one of the previous videos. You can go ahead and check the last one out to reference that. But for now, we're going to get into Q swing. So now we're talking about altering the value of the quantization. How? By affecting the position of every second point in the current quantization grid. You have to be able to have more tricks up your sleeve as a creative. It's not enough just to quantize. I'm telling you, values over 50%, delay the beats, and values under 50%, pre-delay them, meaning they sound rushed. So, this is kind of one of the things, we use different terminology in different contexts, but you have to be clear about what they mean. So delaying meaning lazier, pulling, and pre-delay meaning pushing or hurrying. Let's go ahead and highlight this to be 100% clear. And you know what? Something that I should just cover really quick. I actually think this is important. If you ever want to find the manual, you can find it under help. And this right here is an incredible resource. So yeah, check it out and learn what it does. But if you want the Logic manual so you can look at, you can go ahead and find that here. Awesome. Well, I just want to make sure. Logic Pro Tutorials. Yeah, here it is right here. Okay. Q swing. The most practical settings fall between 50% and 75%. So if you go over that, it seems like it's going to feel a little bit disjointed, maybe just a little bit off. So we want a proper swing feel, and so we'll stay within 50, 75, depends on the song. Now we can apply this both to audio and MIDI. For information about Q swing and other advanced quantization parameters, it looks like we'll get into that as soon as we're done with this. All right, transposition, you know what that does. No need to get into that. Let's look at Q swing. So let's cover the same example as before. Lounge vibes, right? I'll turn on quantization. At a value of 16th notes, hit S solo. Let's just listen to this really quick. That's right on the money. I mean, you're hearing every single note every single time. Let's change the Q swing value of audio, and then we'll go into MIDI. So here we go. Let's hear those results. Right, so that's palpable. You can really hear that it changes it. Now that may be a little too much. Let's just go up by 60%, and let's see what that feels like. To me, that sounds a little bit more natural. What I'll do this time is I'll go up to 65, where it should sound a little bit more unnatural. Let's see. So going back to Q range, we're going to increase the Q range, and we're going to see if this helps retain the overall performance, because the groove is there, but some parts are hurried. So if we go back to Q range, right, it requires a certain a deal for recording that already have the right groove but are hurried. So it says here, if you enter a negative Q range, only the notes that fall outside. So let's go ahead and enter a negative Q range. See if this fixes it some. All right, just go 15. Let's see what happens. Okay, let me hear negative 10. Still sounds a little bit off. Let me go negative 21. And then my last one here, negative 30. See, that one sounds okay. Certain parts sound a little bit funky. And so what I'll do now is I'll change the quantization strength to negative 80%. Let's see what this sounds like. That certainly has an interesting feel. I'm not saying that it's right for the song, but at least we have some variation here. Again, with no quantization, it sounds like this. It's kind of soul-less just there. Here's a little bit more, character, inflection. Check it out. By the way, you can always adjust this manually. Like, there's only one hit that's really bothering me here. Which one is it? Let me see. This one right here. And so then what I'll do is just move it off to the right a little bit, because that's the only one that sounds a little bit rushed to me. So you can also design your own performance. Let me go back to, was it this one? Yeah, I think it was. Let me turn something off. Okay. You can just adjust it as necessary. Let me turn this stuff off so I don't have to move my screen. 1 second. Wait, this one. Okay, good. All right, take a listen. And of course, if you just wanted to turn off this flex marker, you could just turn it off. All right, very cool. So that's Q range, Q strength. Let's look at Midi for a quick second. Let's see if we could look at this piano. And so right now it's quantized to 16th notes, just right on the money. Check it out. Okay, we want to bring a little bit of Latin flavor here. So let's go ahead and try this out. 16th notes. Let's just change up the quantization. And so what I'm going to do here is reframe the screen so you can really see how this affects the MIDI events. And so let's look at Q swing first. Okay, basically it's like every second and fourth notes are moved over. So again, here's before. Here was it was at a value of 50 when we first started. That's on the grid, and I'll just go up to 70. Cool. Let's listen to this. That's way off, right? It's not going to work. That's too much swing, too much groove. Let's just go to 60%. Now from here, can we start to utilize Q range and Q strength? Well, let's see. Let's see if I maybe move this down, right? Okay, and I'll change the quantization strength. Let's see if we can find something that really works. Q strength of 100. All right, and then final change, 55 as opposed to 50 on the Q swing, on the quantized swing. right, so the last thing that I would recommend in terms of trying to find the right feel for your song is using the quantization, right? Making sure everything is quantized to a 16th note, but then playing with the quantization strength. You'll find that here in the piano roll editor. And so then what I'll do is, hold on, let me just see. You can also use it here as well, but we're just going to use it here. And so I like it on the grid, but man, I just wish it had a little variation. So looks like it's not. Yeah, there it is. It's moving just a little here. Let me zoom in so you can see what I mean. Look at the notes right here. So we'll take the slider and move it over to the left. Check it out. Check it out. See how they're moving a little bit off the grid, right? So this is not ideal, in that it would be great if every other note would just move. And so that's why you would use these other parameters, right? This is why swing would be kind of a great thing if it was working for this. It's not really working the way I want it to. But maybe also you could change the quantization value. Maybe you can change to a value of 32nd notes, and maybe this will be a little bit more subtle. And looks like it's not, but it's a process of experimentation and just trying to find out what works. This is definitely 16th notes. I think maybe, there we go, that's probably a little bit better. And then working with the quantization strength and seeing how we can utilize that to fit a little bit better. Let's take one last listen to this. Here we go. So you can see that has a lot of a better feel. The notes on the downbeat are on the grid, so this works really well. And then these kind of other notes are not. You see, not on the grid. These are not on the grid. Let's see. These are on the grid. So in combination is really where it's at. I just used the quantization of 52, so it's very minor, but the quantized range kind of really took it there, along with the quantized strength, which it was by default, it was at 100, but I'm sure you can play with it and find a nice groove. All right. So that is Q range, Q strength. This is really just about trying to find the best of the best for your performance. When you quantize it, what does it sound like? Does it have life? Does it need to be better? I mean, what does it need, right? That's what we're looking for here. So we went over all of the logic region parameters this far. Let's go over some of the velocity. Yeah, these are lesser known functions. So let's go over these. So when I click on the same performance piano roll editor, we're inside of a Midi region, so we have other parameters. So velocity. Remember how I was telling you with delay, we can't visually see the changes that take place? Well, the same thing actually applies here, believe it or not. I can change the velocity of all the regions because they're all currently selected, but we're not going to see this visually. So this is just a tool for final polishing. You have the performance, but man, it just needs a little bit more tack on the piano. You need a little bit more bite out of it. So I would lift it up just a little bit. So let me actually bring this down because I actually think the piano is attacking a little too hard. So let's go -30 and let's see if this rounds out the sound. So in a case like this, it didn't really work, right? It's too much. Let's just go -10 and see if this helps. Okay, and that actually may be a little bit better, simply because if I go to 0, you'll hear that there's a plentitude, substantial amount of, transients, especially at the beginning of the piano. Here we go. See, you can do much better by just slightly blending it in by means of velocity. So visually, nothing's changing, but as far as performance, it is. Now, this is all based on the instrument that you're using and how it utilizes velocity as a whole. But experiment. So then, delay will move the position of the MIDI notes. You can see I have a value of 65. So it starts off with 0. So this means that I am kind of pulling the groove a little bit, not by much, 45.1 milliseconds, but enough so that you can feel that this salsa pianist is chilling. You know, he's just kind of in the back playing his parts without rushing. Dynamics. What does this have to do with? Well, let's read it here first. The parameter affects the velocity value of notes. Think of this like a MIDI velocity compressor. But instead of adding or subtracting, the differences between soft and loud are increased or decreased. So to be frank, if you have values above 100, they will expand the dynamics, thereby increasing the difference between loud and soft, while the values below 100 compress the dynamics. So basically, it takes whatever the highest value is and brings it down, and the lowest value and brings it up. The fixed setting causes all notes to be transmitted at a velocity of 64. So if you choose fixed, everything will be at 64, regardless of the actual performance. This doesn't have a lot of variation. We're just hearing what velocity value is this. It's 127, so it's all maxed out. But if I wanted to make this a little bit less dynamic, I could, you know, bring this down. So let's listen to this at full blast. Let's reduce the dynamics. So you see how we're containing the performance? This is by means of velocity. It's just changing the overall velocity. So I'm going to go ahead and just bring it down to 88. Let's see what this sounds like. And so when you're using dynamics in conjunction with velocity, you have a lot of power here. And as you may have remembered, this asterisk means there's an offset value. So there are different values, and so it can't read out just 88 or whatever because it's looking at other velocity values across all of these regions because I have track 14 selected. Okay, so gate time. This has to do with the length of the performance. So let me start off here. I will drag this down over time and then bring it back up. All right, so this right here is probably the gem of today. If you're going to get anything from our session today and our time together, it's the gate can drastically affect the overall expression and dynamics of any MIDI performance. It's subtle, but if you create these changes over the course of 2, 3, 4 minutes, it can really be an absolute game changer. So please experiment with gate time. It's just changing the length of the performance. Now, I believe if it's not long enough or short enough, you may not get much from it, but that's something that you'll have to check out. So let's finish off here. Clip length. This one's really wild. If I have, hold on, let me turn something off. I can see something's moving. Okay. If I have a performance where a note drags out beyond the MIDI border, see how bar 23, you don't see the note, but it's actually still there. See that? So what this does is it actually allows you to play this out, and so you can hear the rest of the note. Check it out. Let's try that one more time. Now, why this is important is if you have overlapping regions, this is a very clever way of still being able to play that MIDI note. If clip length is on, it will literally just cut off at the right border of this MIDI region. Check it out. So this is a really clever tool that Logic came up with to kind of just capture that whole performance. So if you have a bunch of regions, it's really helpful to be able to have all that. Okay, track 14. We got some other values here, all related to quantization. Let's take a quick look. Velocity, right? So if you play with this, it's going to change the value of your velocity. So, if you go to 0, it's just going to retain all the original. And if you go up, it's going to change the values. Quantization length determines how the length of the quantized notes are affected. So a value of 0 has no effect. Negative values also notes length further. So this changes the actual length. Okay. Flamming changes the position. So if everything's on the downbeat, it will be slightly off. Think of a drum flam, right? Like somebody playing a flam. So one hit right after the other. And then it looks like we have Q range, which comes right back into the picture, which is a very musical quantization. So if you have the groove, but it's too hurried in some places, this is something positive for you. And let's go ahead and just test out those waters, and then we'll wrap it up. So let's start with, well, in all fairness, the performance is pretty fixed just in nature. So why don't I randomize all this? And there's different ways to do this, but probably the easiest is to go into functions, Midi transform, randomize velocity. And I'll hit operate only. Okay, so now this really gives us a better picture of what we're talking about. Let's press play here. Okay, so in terms of velocity, if I keep it here, it's not changing anything. But if I go up to 100, again, visually, we're not seeing anything. But let's see if we hear anything. Okay, I wonder if that has to do with quantization length. Oh, so check this out. This you can actually visually see. Check this out. You see how I'm changing the overall length? So if something is shorter, it becomes longer. Look at this. That is wild. Pretty cool. I didn't even know that was possible. So this can give you a completely different performance. Here, check out performance A. Check out performance B. Right? Just different. It's just a different performance. And here's C. Just more sustained. So that's really cool. What an interesting feature. So for this next one, again, everything has to be on the downbeat. So let me go ahead and just expedite this by doing this. Hold on. Is this going to work for me? Boom. Let me just make it work. So all of these are now on the beat. Let's highlight them, hit Q. Wait a minute. Change the value to 16. That's not happening. Why not? Hold on. Let me just select this one. Oh, well, there's a bunch of different settings here as well, so that may be affecting me. But here, let me just show you really quick. Yes, okay. So both of these are selected, and I'm going into Flam, and I'm raising this up, and you can see what it's doing is it's just literally shifting the notes over a bit. So this is really helpful when you're looking for some kind of like guitar stroke or drum flam. So if I bring this note over, check out these three being flammed. Bring this up. See how it's changing the overall positioning? And so this has to do with kind of like, think of a guitar strumming, right? That's like flam. If you look up drummer flamming, you'll know what I mean. We go back into Q range, which already has a positive value, and this changes kind of the overall performance. So that's something that you can play with as well. And then, of course, the quantization strength, which will change the overall feel. Because if you have a feel of 16th notes, but you're backing off so it's not perfectly on the grid, it will be affected accordingly. So it just depends. So here, I'll back off a little bit. Let's see if we can hear this as a whole. Quantization strength. Okay, here we go. A little bit more pull and laid back. Okay, my good friends, thank you very much for this session. There's a lot of detail in there. The next time we meet, we get to do this again. We get to derive and extract as much as we can. We're going to look at applying this information permanently, because everything that I've done has not been permanent. It looks like we're going to go into applying this to everything except the channel and delay, quantization types, as we talked about, but we get some more information here, and then the quantization values. So thank you so much for another great session. This is Eddie Gray on behalf of hfmusicacademy.com. Just wishing you the most awesome day. Stay up, stay happy, and I will see you tomorrow. Cheers.